Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire. Jeff, could you maybe laugh just a little bit less? Come on, man.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Caroline Greene, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer. How's it going?
It's going great, thanks. I'm so excited to be here today.
Now, did I screw up your name or not?
Well, it depends when you edited the recording. So far, it
on that
sounds
last
good.
one, I got it right. Okay,
It was great. It was great.
Cool. Okay, so maybe those outtakes will go in some future bumper. We'll see.
Yeah, it would be awesome.
Okay, so you are an author and a speaker and a coach. And I like what you say in your one sheet here, recovering lawyer. That's hilarious.
Thanks. It's true. It's true.
And then chronic overachiever. I never suffered from that affliction. I'm probably the opposite.
Perfect.
And then you are also, this is kind of neat, a 2-time Amazon best-selling author. One book was called Matter, How to Find Meaningful Work That's Right for You and Your Family. And then Next. I like that for the next book. How to Start Your Successful Business That's Right for You and Your Family. That's cool because you included that you and your family. Because it's either that or divorce, probably.
I know it can be. It's tough.
Right,
you know?
right. So that's what you've got going on now. And we can find out more at CarolineGreenCoaching.com. Did I get that right? No.
Caroline. Yeah.
Greene. Wow,
Green with
that
an
is
E.
so hard to
It's
do
tricky,
that.
right? I know.
Is it the Greene? Is that it?
I think it is. I think there's something about the sound. I don't know.
Yeah. I've done this many, many times, and this is like the second name that I've really super tripped up on.
It's all good. I'm pretty
sorry.
confident in who I am, independent of how my name's pronounced. So I think we're good.
CarolineGreenCoaching.com. If I slow down, I can do it. Okay, so let's go back in the time machine and talk a little bit about what you were like in high school.
Yeah. So, I actually, to understand me in high school, I have to go back a little bit further because,
No problem.
so I moved around all the time as a kid. I call myself an urban gypsy. It was, I had to do like a collage in 8th grade and it was like, who are you? And it was on the cover of the newspaper that day. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. Because we literally moved like every 3 years, sometimes every 1 year. And,
Oh, wow.
and people were always like, oh, your parents are in the military. And I was like, no, my dad's a lawyer. He just gets bored easily.
Right.
He would just like decide to get new jobs. So moved all the time as a kid. And then he actually passed away when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
And so I had this like sort of unique foundation going right into high school. And I grew up in a very traditionally success-oriented family. So both of my parents were first to college, first to law school.
Right.
Like my mom was a 3rd generation Italian. Like there was just a lot of emphasis on education, the classic American dream, and
Right.
excellent. We had 2 rules in our family: no lies and no B's. It was like
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was just
That's pretty cool and kind of hardcore at the same time, right?
yeah, which pretty much describes my entire childhood. Pretty cool and pretty hardcore.
Right?
That's it.
It's like the first world problems from, very young age,
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I'm deeply steeped in first
But
world.
that's good though, because,
Well, the other thing is too, is that like to my parents' credit, right? Like they worked really hard so that all I struggled with was first world problems.
which is good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they
that's
wanted
what I'm
to
getting
provide
at.
for.
Yeah.
So, but I suffered mightily at the hand of first world problems. So,
Right.
so I grew up like really just, our mantra every day is another chance to succeed. That was like an actual family mantra. Yeah.
Wow.
So my father passed away. I was in middle school at the time. My mom had to go back to work. Like everything was just sort of crazy.
That's a giant veer.
Total veer, and from like a very stable, very like, we all had dinner together and played family games on Sunday, and then all of a sudden like everything was everywhere.
That's more like a tectonic shift. Really.
It was a tectonic shift, yeah. And so
the world is different now.
The world is different now, yeah. So I ended up actually asking to go to boarding school.
Wow.
Because
asking to go to boarding school.
My brother was already in boarding school. My mom was working, and I was like alone, I was alone as an 8th grader. So I'd get off the bus by myself and into this, like, I lived in one of these suburbs.
Kid.
Yeah, totally. It was like so bizarre. It's like I lived in this like perfect suburbs, like this like perfect house that like all 4 of us used to live in. And then it was like, hey, just me and my key and my Domino's order. So I was like, this is not what I'm signed up for. So
no bueno.
No bueno. I asked to go to boarding school, and my mom was super supportive, even though that meant she'd be alone. And
you're still like 12 or 13?
I was 13.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
like
eighth
a year
grade
after
or
my
ninth
dad
grade
died.
or something?
Yeah, 8th grade, year after my dad died. And so I actually went off to boarding school. So I went to what's considered probably the best prep school in America. It's Phillips Exeter Academy in the small town of Exeter, New Hampshire. And
sounds fancy.
It's so fancy. I mean, so fancy. I can't even tell you.
Defines
it's
fancy. It sounds
in both
the
colleges.
Definition. If you look up fancy, it says that the name of that school.
Oh yeah, it does. Our mascot is a griffin. If that gives you it's not even.
It's almost like going to Hogwarts without the wizards.
Like you have to like look up the mascot in order.
It's a mythical beast, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So So I went to Exeter, very fancy, and I my life was in total tumult at the time. It was like I didn't know up from down, but I knew like what it took to succeed, right? Like that had been drilled into me.
Right.
You study hard, you work hard, you focus, you don't get distracted, you find people who will help support you in what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. And so I like just dove into high school like a crazy maniac person.
Right.
So, no
bees were allowed.
No bees were allowed. In fact, I gotta be in Spanish. And I came home and I was like, after my first semester, and I was like, I gotta be in Spanish, and it's so unfair because I've never taken Spanish before, and all these kids had taken Spanish, and they're, I went to public junior high. It's like we didn't have Spanish, and all of these kids, most of them had been at these schools where they had been taking Spanish since they were like in first grade. So I get put in Spanish 101 with all these kids who like basically already speak Spanish. And I was like complaining about it, right? Because that's
a real thing right there.
When you're 14. I know it is a real thing.
No, I'm just saying, like when you're the one catching up, it's like really, really hard. Yeah.
And there was no like personal ownership of that. I was not emotionally mature enough to be like, all right, this is a challenge and I'm going to rise to it. I threw myself on the bed being
just drowned.
It's not fair. It's not fair. Yeah. So my mom was like, I'm sending you to Spain. That's like, she was like,
wow. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, we solve problems in my family. There was no like Spanish tutor. It's like I went to Spain for the summer.
You're getting immersion.
I got immersion and came back into like AP Spanish. It's like I skipped me a grade because I like now spoke Spanish from living in Spain. So, anyways, that gives you like the flavor of the intensity of my high school experience. It was. We hit obstacles. We did what it took to solve the problem,
Totally.
So that was my high school experience. And, so I'll just stop there because it's a little unusual.
No, I love it. So, okay. But usually the other question that I ask is, who did you hang out with? But it seems like you didn't have time to do anything fun.
No, that's the total opposite, actually. Oh, here's the thing. When you take a kid like me and you put them in a prep school environment.
Yeah.
You get to go to school 6 days a week, which for someone like me was like the best.
Right. It was your thing.
Like,
it was your thing.
It was like, oh my God, I get to go to school.
That's
6 days
all you wanted to do.
So
right.
Played 5 different varsity sports while I was there. I sung in an a cappella group. I was in a show choir. I did everything. I did student leadership. I was like a dorm proctor. Like I did it all. I was like, I was like part choir dork, part varsity, jock, part student leader. I was sort of like
definitely ambassador type.
Yeah.
No, really. Jack of all trades, master of few.
Yeah.
You were doing your minga minga me's and voice warm ups and then
Exactly.
running off. Did you do any drama?
Drama. I'm still angry about this to this day. In order to be in the spring, like the big drum, it's called Dramat when I was there, the Dramat production in the spring. It rehearsed during varsity sports hours. So you had to choose
it was an either or situation.
Or drama. And I was really athletic. So, and I loved my sport. And I knew, by the way, that my sport was going to get me into college and my Dramat was not. So,
right. Okay.
And because I was so success oriented, right? Like I was like, well, this is an obvious choice. I need to stay with
Let's throw away that thing that might be fun.
Right.
And focus on what I'm really good at and what will pay off in the future.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the midst of all this too, I'm remarried and wonderful guy, very, very happy to have him in my life. But he like upped the seriousness, right? So like he would tell me, like my mom was like, do your best and your best will always be good enough. That's what she used to always say to me. Okay. He was like, school is your job. Like, wow. Yeah. Like school is your job.
Yeah.
And so he was even more hardcore. So he was like quit choir, more time for grades. But like I was already getting A's. I was like, I don't really understand why I have to quit choir to like work harder.
Yeah.
So that was
that's trying to craft your college resume already, obviously. Oh, right.
Yeah. Curate my life.
I can contrast that with like my parents. My mom grew up a farmer. And then my dad worked in a factory until he retired. So completely different backgrounds. Immersion to me was one of my big uncles threw me in the deep end of the pool.
Yes, that's me. I mean, come on.
And I didn't know how to swim, but I learned really quick. That was my immersion training.
We all have our deep ends. Like that's, parents' job to throw us in.
Some of them are metaphorical and some of them are literal. Okay, so you are prepping to be a very, highly placed scholarship freshman in a very prestigious school.
Yeah.
Okay, so which school did that end up being?
Yale.
Yale. Well, you don't get much more prestigious.
Yeah. So I played lacrosse at Yale.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and
you're studying to become a lawyer. So did they have pre-law then?
Yeah, no. So I actually studied American studies, which I did because it was fun. So good for me. I scored a couple points there. Yeah.
I thought you never really judge your past self because everybody's doing the best they can.
They can all, right? So we're all doing the best we can. Yeah. So, so I did American studies is basically like cultural studies, which sort of laid the foundation, honestly, for what I ended up becoming as a life coach, because it's really the study of how we exist, right? It's an ontological study of how we show up in the world and how we craft our reality and how culture is really largely manifested of things that we take for granted now. But, I went to school 8 eons ago. This was all like these type of Foucauldian theories were like groundbreaking. No one had ever heard of constructed reality before. Like we were just entering postmodernism. So it was like this crazy, like, whoa, you mean history isn't really history? It's who writes history that makes history? Like it was, these huge sort of.
But the thing is common as it is, it's not that common that people know these things, know? Because I think that's all common knowledge.
Yeah.
Until I get out in the world and then I remember it's not.
That's the problem too. Like being a life coach, it's like I surround myself by other people for whom this is common knowledge. It's very easy to forget. It's
right. See, I just got a new job as a temp. That's why we're talking on a Saturday, and it's 9 to 5 in downtown LA, and the bank is from Singapore, right? And we are their U.S. branch office. But these folks are, accounting finance types, bankers, right?
Yeah.
And when I bring up things like, let's see here, say like Anti-Fragile. Have you ever heard of that book? No? Okay.
No. Is it good?
That's awesome.
All right. I'm going to write that.
How about Black Swan?
Yeah.
Black Swan, not the Black Swan about ballet, but the Black Swan about financial crashes.
Nope. Then I haven't.
Okay.
That
Fooled by randomness. Okay. So these are all sort of like...
You're exposing my ignorance here. I thought this was a team endeavor.
Sorry.
You're like giving me some weekend reading. I love it. It's great.
Well, these are all good books, but you don't really need to go back. Black Swan, and they're all really good books. They're by this guy, Nasib Nicholas Taleb.
Okay.
But the central theme is let's see. I'll just describe anti-fragile because they're kind of complex.
All right.
But anti-fragile is a made-up word to describe something that's the opposite of fragile. So fragile is something that it gets broken easily, right? Mm-hmm. So anti-fragile means it needs some sort of damage to be better. Yeah. So damage makes it better. Kind of like a human body, you know? So if you don't stress a human body, i.e. you just let it lay down in a bed and feed it and keep it warm and cool and all those things, that'll be bad for that body.
Right.
Because that body needs stress and strain and it's anti-fragile. Does that make sense? But
no, it makes sense.
Yeah, these concepts to Singapore bank people,
right?
No, it does not fit their consensus reality model.
Well, because like we're taught to fight entropy, right? We're taught to seek stability. That's like what we're taught. And we're taught that stability is not fragile. But what we know is that stability is in fact very fragile.
Right.
And it's only systems that can break and heal and evolve themselves, and human beings that are actually the ones that are the most stable in the long term sense. Right. But yeah,
he uses all kinds of really fun examples. But yeah, that whole idea of what I think you called it constructed reality. I heard somebody else call it consensus reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned to accept it and kind of embrace it, but I still feel like a little bit like an alien anthropologist when I'm out in the world.
No, I hear that. Totally.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what life was like for you in Yale.
Yeah. So, if high school was actually for me like super awesome, and it was a community where it was small and they engaged you in what you thought mattered, and like you really felt like you mattered, and whether it was true or not, it was like there was a sense of connectedness and energy. That community that was really for me like very awesome. And then, going to a huge university, it was just where like people, were learning how to be away from their parents for the first time. Like, it's like I've been away from my parents since I was 14. It's like, are you kidding? Like, really? Like, you're learning how to drink? Like, where have you been?
Oh, I had that same experience when I was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I thought those kids were so weird that had gotten to like the age of 18 and hadn't had a beer.
I mean,
I was
it was
like,
just
really?
So it was like, yes, the opposite sex exists. Like what? I don't know. Anyways, but with great compassion. I mean, I sound really judgy, but I'm just
right. It's just like surprising. Yes.
Yeah, and so, so I struggled in college. Like, I just didn't. I didn't really. I still a jack of all trades. I did improv comedy, and
fun.
Yeah, I ran the women's center, and I did all sorts of stuff while I was playing lacrosse. So like, I still like had that like vibe, jack of all trades vibe going on, but I just didn't love college. Like I loved high school, and I really started sort of the sense of excitement and that belief that I could really do things in the world that I believed in and that could have an impact started dwindling really fast when I started looking around at all these other really smart people, like you're sitting in a lecture hall full of like 200 people who are smarter than you. And you're just like every day and you're like, wow, maybe I need to think smaller. Some people have the opposite of impact. They go to school like that. But for me, it was like, gosh, like talk about seeking stability, right? Like I was just like, I'm going to get cut off when I graduate. Like what am I going to do?
Yeah. So you're thinking like survival strategies now.
Survival strategies. Yeah. Like, and at the time in particular, it's like, there's no faster way to a 6-figure salary than law school. Right. I mean, it's just a right. So in the absence of, and I had like great mythology around it. I wrote my law school essay, one of many, on how I was going to use the law to change the world. But like, I know now, at the time, if you talked to me, I was a very like, I thought I was going to be a civil rights attorney or something and go change the world. But really, I know myself, and I can honestly say I was just a scared kid. Right. And,
I want to have those delusions of grandeur.
Yeah. It was like But the thing is, it's like, I actually think that there's some that are delusions, and then there's some that are callings. And you just, you know, sometimes your calling of grandeur is like, you just got to go for it. Like, even if it's, you know, but like the delusion was really a delusion in the sense of I wasn't making that choice from alignment. I just made it because I was scared, and I wanted to do something that gave me the social and economic stability that I wanted when I graduated. So basically, for a lack of something better to do.
No, I get it. Yeah.
I went to law school. Yeah.
Right.
And then from law school, I sort of did the same thing, like got a job. I literally made so many of my decisions based on rankings. You know, I looked at all the top firms in the country and then like applied to those and took the job at the quote unquote best firm I got an offer from.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's, you know, we talk about vroom, vroom. It was like, it was a machine.
That was a whoosh. So how long did you work as a lawyer? What was your first lawyer job, I should say?
Yeah. So my first lawyer job, I worked at a white collar. I worked at a litigation firm in DC doing white collar criminal defense.
Okay.
And I thought that I wanted to be a prosecutor at the time. And it turns out that I hated being a lawyer. I was just so boring and so just boring. And
so what you're saying is it was boring then?
It was boring. And the thing is too, is like I was with these like really smart, amazing people. Like my colleagues were funny, and, you know, and I worked with some of the best in, you know, my mentor there went on to head the Justice Department. It's like I worked with some of the best people that you could possibly work with, and they were funny and witty, and I still hated my job. You know? And I was just
it was like, just you did not like that grind.
Did not like the grinds. Yeah. I did. So, but I still thought that I wanted to eventually be a federal prosecutor. So I had done some jury work in law school, and so I went off to prosecute in a state court in Alexandria, Virginia, and I did that for about a year and a half, and really loved that at the beginning. Loved the excitement, loved the variety, loved working with police officers, loved being a part of law enforcement. Like all of that was super exciting and rewarding and meaningful. And then really just got to the point where I really felt like another cog in another wheel, and I just didn't. I did not feel fulfilled, and I wasn't happy. And so I was just like, you know, this sounds terrible, but it's really true. I was like, if I'm not going to be happy, I'm at least going to make a lot of money. So I
I like that. That's a nice distillation of what most people choose to do, though.
I mean, I just, you know, I try. Honesty is my superpower, is what I'm told. So I try and use it. I wield it with hopefully some sense of humor and
for sure.
So I called up my old firm, and I was like, hey, I've been prosecuting, and I want to come back. And they were like, all right, come on. So I went back to, it was a different firm that I started at, but I had worked there in the summers before, so it was familiar to me, and loved the people, loved the environment, actually really loved my work, and was sort of killing it there until I had babies. And then darn those kids, you know, they kind of
they tend to veer up your life a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, who do they think they are? Right. Yeah, so like I thought if anything, my husband would be the stay-at-home husband, and I would definitely be like the partner at the law firm. But before I was 35, all that, like, you know, go-getter type stuff. And I had this little child, and
some little like biological switch flipped.
Yeah, you know, I actually think it was a lot of different, you know, if we had 12 hours, I would tell you all the different side stories that were going on at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a really spiritual person. I was on this faith journey at the same time, and I really did feel like I had a deeper calling. Like I like in a lot of these decisions were being driven by, like I ended up making them strategically and for success, but for, you know, these family definitions of success. But my heart tug was, you're meant to do something more. You're meant to contribute more. You're meant to engage. And by more, I don't mean more important, right? I don't mean more money. I just mean that sort
something
of
a deeper, meaningful contribution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something and more internally, more.
Exactly. Yeah. And so
more heart. Yeah.
More heart, and, you know, more, for lack of a better word, authenticity, I think.
Yeah.
And nothing, flushes that out like a kid, man. So I had my first baby, and I was just sort of, my world was turned upside down. And I thought I was just going to go straight back from maternity leave in 4 months and kill it some more. And I just had a really hard time. So I ended up staying home for 6 months and went back and just couldn't, I just was so miserable. I just would look at this stack of papers on my desk. And I, again, loved my colleagues, loved the work on an intellectual level, but there was just no sense of alignment, no sense of, this is how I want to use my gifts and talents in the world,
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd look at that picture of that little baby at home with Annie, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. So my firm was awesome. Wow. They let me go back on maternity leave. And then while I was on maternity leave, I got pregnant again, which is just I always say, and I unexpectedly, and people are like, unexpectedly, don't you know how babies are made? It's like, yes, I know how babies are made.
We just didn't plan it.
But it took us 2 years to get pregnant with it's like, you just don't
right.
Oh yeah, okay, so here's baby. So yep, nope. And there was the baby, and so I was pregnant. So I ended up going back on maternity leave, right? Because otherwise I would have transitioned timing. I would have gone back for 3 months again, then been out for 6 months again. It just didn't make any sense. So the firm let me stay out for a year, which was super awesome of them. And then I actually got postpartum when I was, it's now called something else. It's now called pregnancy depression or something. But I basically had symptoms of postpartum while I was in my first trimester. So the whole time I was pregnant, I was suffering from depression, didn't really know it. And I didn't really know what it was. And this wasn't that long ago, but it was long enough ago that no one was talking about postpartum. This was nobody, I barely knew what it was.
It wasn't a thing. You were just.
It was,
kind of too weepy.
No, I was rageful, and it was ugly.
Ooh, wow,
it was
really?
Angry and unhappy and moody, and it just wasn't sadness. It was the whole whoa thing going on.
Wow.
Yeah. So so that took me down. That's sort of down to the low point. I'll stop there and see if you have, questions.
Well, we can talk about it if you want to. Because that's definitely a situation. I mean, it's obviously not the topic of the show, but I was depressed too. My depression was a little bit more non-specific, existential 20-something depression.
Yeah.
But it was more whenever I was alone, I would just cry without any sort of stimulation whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's just oh, I'm still here.
Yeah.
And all those, it's this new depression circuit arose in me,
Yeah, totally.
So,
yeah, no, it's,
I can relate.
And the reason that I really talk about it is because, people, I get the question a lot, how did you find the courage to walk away from a successful legal career?
Right.
And, so, in your terms, how did you veer? How did you find the courage to veer? And it's I didn't find the courage. I got hit upside the head by a 2x4.
Right.
Sometimes that's just the way it happens, So there I was pregnant and
depressed,
and sad and
raging
and raging and all this stuff and denying that I had a problem, right? It was just it was sort of you put a baby inside of you and see how you feel. It was
you're blaming everybody.
Blaming everybody. Yeah, total blame displacement. So anyways, so it wasn't until my second child was sleeping through the night that and I don't do well with sleep deprivation on top of all of it, of course. So she was a really bad sleeper. So it took her about 9 months to sleep more than 4 hours. And so she was about 9 months old, and she had been sleeping through the night for a little bit. And I had this very cliched sounding moment where I got out of the shower and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And it was this first time, I looked at myself and I saw this person whose eyes were gray and I looked sad, and I looked tired and I sort of had this awareness of oh my gosh, this is how I'm showing up in the world.
You had a moment of clarity.
Yeah. And I'm showing up angry and I'm showing up sad and I'm showing up frustrated and disconnected and sick, and I'm not taking care of myself and all this stuff. And then at the same time, I was I had this deep sense of who I really was. And that's what makes it sound so cheesy. It's this sudden awareness of what for lack of a better, there are all sorts of terminology out there, but the false self, the sort of like the self the world was seeing, and this true self, this like kind, loving, compassionate, funny, outgoing,
Where's that person? Where'd that person go? Yeah.
Yeah. And I also realized that like, I sort of thought that it didn't matter how I was showing up because I knew who I really was. So like, I never had a crisis of confidence, right? Like I never had like a lack of knowing who I was. I just sort of thought that because I knew who I was, it didn't matter who I showed the world,
Yeah.
And it was like this interesting, like,
I think I've done that.
I think we've all done that.
Yeah, I think we've all done that. You're right.
Like, it's okay if you yell at somebody because they know that you didn't mean it. It's like, or you yelled at them. Like,
or no.
Let's own that. Like,
right.
You had a different choice, Yeah. And so that for me just like really kicked into high gear my spiritual journey. It kicked into high gear these like really open inquiries into who I wanted to be and what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind of mother I wanted to be. And I just remember like looking at myself, and I walked out into the bedroom. My like poor husband was like just trying to put on his pants to go to work, and I looked right at him, and I said, look, I don't know if I can be happy like other people can be happy, but I'm going to try. Like for you and for the girls and for myself, I'm going to try. And my husband, who was like literally a saint, just looked at me and said, okay, and I just like the best response in the whole, like one word more, one word less, it's like could have totally just derailed me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nope.
Totally.
Nope,
right.
Nope. Not good.
Or like, you're fine. No,
you're fine.
What do you mean?
Right.
What do you mean?
Or that sucks. Or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
He just looked right at me and was like, okay.
Okay.
And I was like, okay.
The right kind of okay, too.
The right kind of okay. Yeah. Totally. I think my guardian angels were watching over us both that day.
Thank goodness.
So.
Yes.
Thank goodness. Yeah. So,
because one wrong word from a dude. And in defense of dudes, because I'm one of them, we're really always just grasping at straws when it comes to dealing with people and women in general,
Well,
so.
Words.
So when we get it right at all, we just feel like so blessed and lucky, I think.
Well, and he's mastered the okay. My brother actually tells him all the time. He's like, you're just like, you're okay. Everything's okay with you. And Dave just like shrugs. He's like, yeah, it seems to work out better that way.
I've got a buddy, and he always laughs at me because one of his things is like we work together at several different jobs. And in the military, people will always just like there's like this sport of trying to get a rise out of people. It's like, ooh, there's somebody we can really spin up if we say the right things. And they make sport of pushing people's buttons just to watch, watch people explode. And, and I always had this whenever anybody messed with me and I wasn't in a position to mess back. I would just shrug my shoulders and go, okay.
Yeah, totally. It's universal. It's universal dude language.
Yeah. With this nonchalant, like, are you talking to me?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever.
Right. Exactly. It's the whatever kind of okay.
Yeah. Totally. It's like a great
It's
skill.
a different okay than what your husband used.
Yeah, but it's equally important. It's a versatile word.
One of the other things I think that it's important for all men to know, and I'm sure a lot of men have heard it, but you can help me either confirm or deny this. But sometimes the best thing to say to a woman who's complaining about anything is to just say, "That sucks."
Yeah, totally.
And then stop.
So here's the thing that and this goes all the way back to women are from Mars, men are from Venus, or whatever. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus stuff. But to understand that the way that the women show up in the world are the feminine for if we want to degender it because they're men who show up this way, etc. But like this type of being is a need for connection, and that connection comes from being truly seen and truly heard. And in order to be truly seen and truly heard, you need to feel like you're not being fixed. So whereas
Oh, right,
problems,
right.
a masculine response, again, regardless of whether or not it's coming from a woman or a man, is really this, I'm going to fix that.
Right.
If you have suffering, let's make that better. And so it comes from a very loving place because the listener wants to alleviate the pain of the person who's speaking. So they're like, well, why don't you just call your mom and whatever?
Right.
And that's when it escalates, right? Because the person speaking is like, you're not listening to me. You're not to do with my mom. You know?
Stop trying to fix me.
Yeah, like, are you saying this is my fault?
Right.
You know?
You've just and the dude is just like, whoa. I have just stepped in it.
Because from his perspective, right? He's just trying to love her. Like he's like, you're hurting. I'm gonna help you.
Right.
What she actually just needs is you. What that sucks is saying is, I see your pain. I hear your pain. I validate that you are. I see that you're hurting.
I hear you. I know you exist.
Yeah. Right.
And there you are in pain.
And I'm with you in that pain.
Yeah. And you know, if you can bite your lip and say, I feel your pain.
You might get
you might not get impeached. Right.
But that's what people want.
It's wacky.
It's just the way, the way we're created, man.
Yeah.
We're just wired for connection. And I think
that's true. The wired for connection thing is sort of biological, I think.
Yeah. Oh no, it's
because I spent some time, at home, not working, trying to do a thing where I work from home, and I don't really like that.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people around, and I've learned something about being human from another guest. She was a PhD in another field, but then she started in retirement studying how human brain chemistry is very much like other mammal brain chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
And we're herd animals.
Yeah, we are.
And absolutely. We need to have the herd around. And when we don't, here's the thing, is what she says is everything's trade-offs. It's like, and she tells the story about, say, like you're a gazelle and you're in your herd and you see some grass over there and it's greener and it looks way more tasty than this crappy stuff that the herd is eating. But you want to go over there because it looks really tasty. But if you go too far away from the herd, you might get eaten by a lion.
Totally.
So you need the herd, but they kind of suck at the same time, Well,
and I think part of the art of coaching and why I love what I do so much is it helps you remember that there's actually no lion.
Not in our environment.
Not in our environment. That our brain is wired to scream.
But that doesn't mean, you're not going to feel like there's a lion.
Oh, no, we feel like there's a lion.
That there's just not one. Right.
But understanding.
Right. Understanding that.
Coaching is being able to say, wow, that green grass, that's something that I really want. That's really in alignment for me. But my brain is telling me that that's the worst friggin' idea I've ever had.
If you get that grass, you're going to die.
You're going to die.
Right.
That's literally, I can't even tell you, and this happens all the time when people are trying to talk about when they're trying to make their veers, right?
Right.
When they're trying to say, that's actually the direction that I want to go. I want that grass. Their brain is literally telling them the equivalent of you're going to die.
You're going to die.
Right? Because, and it's also, your herd's going to, your mom's going to hate you. Your friends are going to think you're stupid. Your mentors are going to criticize you. Yeah. All of your friends are going to leave you. And here's the truth. Here's the hard truth that the herd might abandon you.
Yes. But
what nobody tells you is, but then you can find a new herd and they look for grass like the grass you want.
That's true. There's always another herd and there are very few lions.
There is always another herd. And for us, for humanity right now, there are no lions.
There are no lions.
Except ones that we make up in our brains.
There are legitimate dangers, but you can pretty much pick them out pretty easily, right?
You can pick them out really easily.
Yeah, and they're not related to career choices.
They're not related to career choices.
There you go.
They're not related to that grass. There's still to push the analogy, it's like there's still lightning. There's still cliffs you can fall over.
Right.
There's still,
there are still lions, but they're not typically in American cities.
Yeah, and they're not, they're not coming after you.
Right.
They're just not,
No, they're not.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, I actually think it's a terrific story. I also think it's really illustrative of like sort of exactly, going back to what I said earlier, people always ask me like, how did you get the courage? It's like, well,
how did you get the courage?
I got accidentally separated from the herd, dude.
Okay.
Like I think the postpartum separated me from the herd. And then all of a sudden I was like, that's not my herd anymore. I don't want to go back to the law firm. I don't want to go back to that herd, even though I love them and I respect them and they taught me so much, and that's not where I belong.
Right.
And,
so did you end up like just quitting altogether?
yes, it took me 3 years. So
Okay.
my firm was so awesome. They left me on unpaid leave for 3 years. Like I still had an office and a secretary and a phone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were so
They
awesome.
really wanted you to come back.
They really wanted me to come back, and they were so supportive.
Yeah.
And then my mentor just called me and she was like, so
It's-
I've known this for a long time, but it's time you come to terms with it. It's not coming back.
Okay.
She's like, and now it's a lot of paperwork for me. So like, you gotta come like pick up your stuff.
Right. You've got to really let go now.
It's time to let go. And
Okay.
she was great. She was like, and you can always come back. She
That's
if you change your
nice.
mind.
Wow.
Yeah, they were
What a
awesome.
great herd you had.
Such a great herd, which makes it so hard to leave, by the way. Makes it so hard to
That's
leave.
true.
It'd be so much easier if my herd sucked and I
Right.
could tell you how awful they were, but
Right,
they were
right.
awesome. They were an awesome herd. So, so then I just sort of like sat in this dead space for a while. I thought that I was going to die. Speaking of like, I thought a lion was coming for me, like in the word, but like I'm the sick. It wasn't because I was eating good grass. It's because I was like the wounded deer, It was just like,
Wow.
I just had a really hard time. And then, so I was, and I was on this spiritual journey and I was studying and reading and, I had 2 small kids at home and just dealing with life and trying to keep the machine running and
Trying to keep your brain happy like most of us.
trying to keep my brain happy. And, and then I just really sort of, I'd stalled out with my therapist. Like she was great, but like, I just didn't really understand what we were doing together anymore. And I discovered the work of Martha Beck. So Martha Beck is the type of coaching that I did. And she's a Harvard trained, sociologist who sort of considered one of the sort of, they're like about 10 people who sort of founded life coaching around the same time. And like, she was one of the gurus who sort of had this idea to start life coaching. And she didn't even know what she was doing. She was just like, started talking to interesting people about interesting things. And all of a sudden she's like, I think I created this thing. People have called
I might
me.
have made life coaching.
Yeah, like Time Magazine, like put her on the cover as like America's Life Coach or something. And she tells this funny story. I can't remember what magazine it was, but she read the article and she was like, oh, that's what I do? That's what that is. That's awesome.
Wow.
I'm really awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I had
So
no
cool.
idea it was awesome.
So I read like a bunch of her books and I really like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my herd. Like it was the first time that we're really pushing this analogy, by the way, but it's effective.
That's
so
good. Yeah, it works.
I really was like, these are my people. Like she gets what I'm talking about. And she's crazy, by the way, but like in the best way. Like for me, it was a little threatening at the time because she talked about like magic and following your inner wisdom and like all these things that the lawyer
very
made.
woo-woo. Yes.
Very woo-woo. For like the lawyer, the like Yale UVA educated lawyer was like,
Your
I'm
brain
sorry.
is pooping all over those words.
Yeah, like I closed the book 5 times. Like I was like, what is this nonsense? But I couldn't stop reading it. So I experienced more healing in 2 weeks of reading her work than I had in the past 3 years doing all the other things I'd been doing.
See?
I mean, it was incredible. So I was like, you know what? I Googled her. She had a life coach training program. And I said to my husband, again, I was like, I think I want to do this program. Like, I know it's expensive. But like, I really think that this is what's going to help me heal in the way that I want to heal, because he'd been in this with me now for a couple of years and things had gotten better from like the rock bottom, but I certainly was not thriving. I was no longer depressed and sad and angry, but I wasn't
You're not your full energized self yet.
Exactly. So
You're still momming though.
I'm still momming. Yep. Totally still momming and momming full time. And he was totally supportive. So I did that program and we actually joke now because he listened to something I said or overheard me either it was on a podcast or talking to someone saying, I went to life coach training without any intention of being a life coach. And he's like, then why did we pay all that money? And I was like, it was part of my healing journey. And he's like, oh, I'm glad I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
He always thought I was going to have a business, but I didn't.
Oh, wow.
I really did it for person. And I went through the whole time kicking and screaming, saying, I'm never going to be a life coach. I'm not here to be a life coach. All these people were talking about launching their practices. And I was the one who was like, no practice for me. Like, I don't want to coach people. And won't you, sometimes we resist our deepest callings. And for me, it was not so gradual introduction to, I just really felt like the divine force in my life was saying, like, look, this is what you asked for. You told me that you wanted to use your gifts and your talents in service to the world in a way that was completely and authentically aligned with you. Like, here's your choice. If you want to walk away from it and pretend that you didn't find it, that's up to you. But
yeah.
And
have you ever? Are you a fan of Jeff Bridges?
Yes. Sort of.
Yeah. Well, he's been around forever, right? You know who he is. Yeah. He did an interview. Actually, I've heard tell this same story twice on two different, one on a podcast and then one on Howard Stern.
Uh-huh.
Because you said the word resist, I thought I would try to sum it up and share it because I think you might like it.
Sure.
So he did a painting called Jeff Makes a Decision.
Love it already.
And he's like in a river in a canyon kind of like river.
Uh-huh.
So maybe like the Colorado River out by Needles,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So and there's all of these whirlpools, right? That he's and his job is he's in a boat and he has to navigate around the whirlpools and keep going downstream. Mm-hmm. Right? And in the vortex of each whirlpool, there's a beautiful jewel.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And he'll be like, oh, I got to avoid that whirlpool. Oh, that's a pretty jewel.
Totally.
Oh, that's a pretty jewel. And so his method of choosing a project is to resist the jewels.
Yeah.
Until he can't resist anymore. And they're just so awesome, he can't avoid taking them, So I thought that was just a beautiful metaphor for you should resist everything that is vying for your attention. You really should, because a lot of it is mirage and BS. And, so the more you resist, you can go, is that BS? Oh, yeah, that's BS. Or is that too good to be true? Yeah, that's too. Is that a crack pipe? Yeah, that's a crack pipe.
Totally. And I love that this is coming. I love that story. By the way, it's super helpful to me. And I'm actually right now making a really important decision. And when you're in the decision making process, trying to decide whether or not something is a jewel at the bottom of a whirlpool or not, it's like very. Sometimes it looks like it's like just floating on the surface of the water because you choose to overlook the whirlpool that's like right in front of you.
Right.
And what I always tell clients is, using your metaphor, I'll just put it in those terms, is look, if the discomfort of getting the jewel, of going through the whirlpool, is less than the comfort of having the jewel, then it's your decision. Like, if you're willing to struggle and it doesn't feel like a distraction from moving downstream, then like maybe that's just part of your journey. But you have to ask yourself whether or not the time, the energy, right? Is it really worth going to get that jewel? Because there might be something.
You might damage your boat going down.
Yeah, there's a lot,
You're going to invest a lot of time and effort getting in and out of that.
Right. And here's the thing, though, is that truthfully, like, people always ask me, like, oh, what do entrepreneurs really need to succeed early in their ventures? And my answer is, besides, the classic persistence, grit, like determination,
you really
all of which
gotta wanna.
You really got to want it. Yeah. But the other thing is discernment.
Totally.
Discernment is like, and people are like, well, how do you get that? It's like, you got to make a lot of bad mistakes. You get trapped in a whole lot of friggin' whirlpools.
That's right.
Being like, the jewel was not worth it.
And my boat is wrecked.
Again.
And I've got to fix it.
It's like, I have no money to fix it.
Well, yeah, the explore thing gets easier the more you do it. Because then the next time you see that jewel, you'll know, no. I know you.
This is the thing that I'm dealing with right now, because, I'm still a fairly young entrepreneur. And I sort of thought, like, after I had fallen in my first couple of whirlpools, I was like, oh, I got this thing down. Like, I know a jewel when I see it that's not worth it. Like, I know my downstream,
Right.
And then it's like, yeah, but the universe gets crafty, man.
Oh, yeah. It's
cracked.
got a big bucket of jewels.
A big bucket of jewels, and you keep going downstream, and those jewels get bigger and bigger
and shinier.
Yeah. And it's like, and it gets really hard to tell, like, whether or not you're drifting off course, or whether or not you're staying your course, or you're getting a jewel. Gosh, it doesn't get easier, because the temptation gets stronger the more opportunities are handed to you. And and so really, having that deep sense of what does it feel like to be on open water? What does it feel like to be moving in the right direction? Is like, I think, just the most.
That's probably the best lesson right there. If you can.
It is. Yeah. That's
my boss in the military said that that's figure shit out. That's figure shit out as like the only skill that humans need. It's like discernment. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your books. Just briefly. So your first one was called Matter, How to Find Meaningful Work That's Right for You and Your Family. Love that.
Thanks. So both of my books are written from a mom's perspective for moms, even though, I think the wisdom in them applies to everybody. But I really had this heart
to have an audience.
Yeah, you have to have an audience. And I just really had a heart for like people who were, I went to school with tons of colleagues who were facing similar predicaments, where they just really had lost themselves in traditional notions of success. And, we talked at the beginning, it's like my journey has been steeped in first world, and it is, it really is. And I'm not ashamed of that, because first world pain is still pain. And I think that, a lot of my clients don't actually take action before they meet me to heal their pain, because they are compassionate, intelligent, kind people who can see the other sort of quote unquote real pain in the world. And they feel bad for taking time to deal with their first world problems, because they think they're just not tough enough, or they're not, And so I have
no place to complain about
I
have problems.
Right. Yeah. So they don't do anything about it. Instead, they just hurt. And part of my bigger mission is really helping, especially women who are in that sort of tough it up, suck it up mentality, recognize that, sure, they're those larger problems that they feel called to solve, they can solve so much more powerfully and effectively when they're in a place of wholeness and they've done the work of healing for themselves. So that book is really largely about finding meaningful work, is really a lot about what we talked about today in terms of like my struggle with postpartum and, basic things that I learned, like you're not your thoughts, like you think that's,
you're not
it's like
your thought. Wow.
Nobody told me that, it's like, I think therefore I am is the way that I grew, it's like everything that's valuable is in your left brain. And so it's like, really, it's like for me, it's a 101 of just like what I wish someone had told me when I started this journey. And all my books are 100 pages or less. Like I write them to be short and easy to read. And, so that was my first book. And then my next book called Next. Is, what's next? So you do this work of asking yourself, okay, what really matters to me? And then what do you do about it? And so Next is a super practical, again, 100-page or less book that I share all the stupid mistakes I made in my first year of trying to launch my business, and really just openly say, like, here's how you can avoid this stuff, and how, again, sort of the basics. How do you know that you're stuck in busy work versus meaningful work that's moving your business forward? How can you, where do you need to be devoting your time? How can you move yourself forward in a meaningful way? So, so those are my two books, and you can get them both on Amazon. Or if you're in the continental United States, you can email me at Caroline@CarolineGreene with an e-coaching.com and put the subject matter of which book you want in the subject line, and we'll get you a paperback copy if you're in the US and an e-copy if you're overseas.
Wow. So in your website is, now let me see if I can get this right, CarolineGreene with an e-coaching.com.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be links to all of that stuff too. And you're on Facebook.
I'm on Facebook. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, Facebook's the easiest way to reach me.
Okay.
Facebook or email.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. This has been a blast.
It's been so fun. Yeah. It's great.
We should reconnect and talk about all the different spiritual books that you read, because I think we might have some crossover there.
That would be awesome.
Because a lot of the things you said was like, oh, wow. And one of my guests, he was, we both said like, what was it? His mantra was, "You are not your mind."
Yeah. It's an important mantra.
It is. It was like, scream that from the mountaintops. But yeah. And the thing is you and I, we've been probably sitting in it and marinating it for so long. Like we said in the beginning, it was like we all just assume everybody knows this, but they don't.
Well, and not only just like not everybody know it, but like I didn't know it 5 years ago.
Right.
It's not
That's
even
true.
like, it's like and I think that there's also this like it's sort of like this crossing over experience where you're like, you have this knowledge and then you're almost embarrassed that you didn't have it before. And then
That's
you forget.
an everyday experience.
Right?
Me. Yes.
Yeah. And then, so that shame makes you think like, oh, of course, like everyone knows this. And it's like, no, they don't.
They don't. No.
They don't. That's why you didn't either. It's not because you were an idiot. It's because no one told you, you know?
Right.
And I think it's so important that once we learn these lessons that we share them, whether it's publicly or just in our communities or in our families.
Or on
Or in a podcast. Like this one, which is awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So is there anything else we need to cover?
No, this was great. It was great fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, no problem. And let's do it again.
Sounds awesome.
I think we can cover more ground.
I think we probably could.
I think we could have a really good time. You know, maybe you could be my co-host someday.
Oh, that would be so fun. That would be great.
Be fun, right?
Yeah.
And we could sing and we could do like karaoke hour.
We could definitely have a karaoke segment. Like every show.
Okay, let me see if I can say her name again. Caroline Greene of CarolineGreeneCoaching.com. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.